Some of you may have heard of the place. It's called Phillip Island. And it's down near in Australia. It's the home to what they call the fairy penguin. Some people call them the little blue penguin. But the folks in that area refer to them as fairy penguins. They're penguins that don't grow but about a foot tall. They're small birds. And every morning the adults, the people will go watch this, the adults will leave their burrows and run out into the waters and go fishing all day long. Every morning they go out to sea. What's interesting is at the end of the day, when they come back in, they return to land bringing the food and so forth for their chicks, which are in the burrows, about 300 to 400 feet up the shore there. They'll stop there at the water's edge. And they'll get into groups together. A group here, and then down to the shore, a little bit, another group, and so forth. And there they'll stand for a few minutes. And their chicks are, again, 200 or 300 yards, 200 or 300 feet up the shore from them there, in their little burrow. And suddenly, all of a sudden, one group will take off. And they'll start waddling as fast as they can up towards the burrow. But all of a sudden, they'll stop. They'll stop, they'll turn around, and they'll run right back to the water's edge. And they'll regroup. And in a minute or two later, they'll take off again. They'll get a certain distance up the beach, and all of a sudden, they'll stop and come back. But eventually, they all make it back to the burrow, but it's a long, drawn-out scenario. You might ask yourself, why this strange stop-and-start ritual? Well, the answer really is kind of simple. You see, these birds are fast swimmers. In water, they can move very quickly and dive very deep. And so in the waters, they're safe from their predators. There's no problem there. But on land, they are really easy pickings for larger predators. Well, rather larger animals. Fox, wild dogs, they say even house cats to be their predators. So really, it's no wonder that they're reluctant to make that journey from the water's edge to the burrow. There's a lot that can take place in 200 to 300 feet with them. They're not fast, but they need to get to the burrow to feed their chicks. But the moment they think they're in trouble, the moment they look out the corner of their eyes and feel as though they're uncomfortable or in danger, they'll turn around and run right back to the water's edge, where it's safe, where it's comfortable. I tell you that story this morning, and some of you are already smiling. I think you know where we're going. We human beings are a lot like that. Now, I don't want anybody in here to think that I'm saying that it's not good to be in the comfort zone. It's very good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being comfortable. And it seems that when we're confronted with the challenges in our life, though, in situations, we find ourselves on that water's edge there. And when we step out of that water and start moving across that beach, we become reluctant. We begin to miss that comfort zone. We begin to be maybe a little afraid, a little tense. We've left that zone. Discipleship follows the same suit. Discipleship is risky. Discipleship calls us to leave our comfort zones sometimes and to venture out. In today's scripture, just prior to what I read for you today in chapter 10 of Matthew, Jesus is beginning to send his disciples out. He's preparing them to send them out into the local area for a while, these 12 disciples. And he's giving them authority to do some incredible things, to cast out demons, to heal the sick. In fact, he gives them the same authority that God has given him to go through his work. He's sending them out to proclaim the message to what he called the lost sheep of Israel. There were people out there that needed to hear what Jesus had to say. And they're to carry out this mission without expecting any earthly reward. He said, you won't find it. It doesn't come that way. But not only that, he tells them, I'm sending you out, but you don't take any money. You don't take any clothing with you. You don't take anything for the trip, matter of fact. You rely on the mercy of those that you fall into the places that you go, is what he says. They're to take nothing. And he goes on to warn them. He sets it up and tells them that the journey is not going to be easy. Discipleship is not easy. And he tells them, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Quite honestly, he says there are people out there who are not going to want to hear what you have to say. You might say that what Jesus is doing is telling them to leave that water's edge. Venture on into the beach, up the beach. But before they leave, he has another piece of information he wants to give them. And he wants to talk to them for a moment about the relationship between him and them. And he tells them that they need to be like him. That's what you can do. Present me to others through yourself, is what he's saying. He said it's enough for the students to be like the teachers and the servants like their masters. Don't just hear what I teach, do what I say. That's what discipleship is. It means to learn, to be a student. But he goes on to say that whatever fate awaits the teacher, him, will also await those disciples. He says to them, if the head of the house has been called Beelzebul, how much more the members of the household? In other words, if you go out and you try to practice what I'm teaching, and people know that you're from me, they're not going to like that, because Jesus has already faced resentment, rejection, chased from synagogues, doors shut in his face, threatened with his life. And he's telling them that this is what you can expect. He has met resistance from others, and he's telling them you can also meet resistance too. But you see, it's not just what he's telling those disciples 2,000 years ago. It's the same today. How can we as disciples expect our message to be warmly met in a culture that all of a sudden seems to be practicing anything but religion? In a culture that is practicing a faith that sometimes is unpopular. Our churches are beginning to grow smaller and smaller. Our young people are beginning to look elsewhere for answers in their life. And the disciple needs to be there. Yes, that's what we're to do. It's like those penguins, people. It's safer to remain at the water's edge. There's no doubt about that. And it's safer than moving out into the dangerous beaches of life, I can assure you, out where the crime is on the rise, child abuse, neglect run rampant, places where people have just turned off Christianity altogether. But the chicks need to be fed. Chicks need to be fed. They're waiting. And this world needs to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. It needs it. Desperately. This world needs to hear the witness, saving grace of God. They need it. But to do so, we run the risk of being rejected, chastised, ridiculed, and in some parts of this world, quite honestly, to be physically abused. But Christ calls us. He calls every one of us. He calls us out of the waters of safety and comfort into the beaches where wolves do wear sheep's clothing. He calls us to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. That can be done standing in the checkout line barber shop. We can tell people about Christ. The chicks need to be fed. But it means we have to move away from the water's edge. But here's the good news in this. The good news is that we are in the caring protection of God at all times and in all places. Listen again to what Jesus tells these disciples before he sends them out into that kind of world. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. We close with another illustration, a story that I read not too long ago about a group of early American Indians who had a unique practice of training young braves, bringing them up into the tribe there. And on a boy's 13th birthday, he was taken out into the woods, deep out into the woods. And there he was to spend the night without weapons, without food, and without warmth of fire. He was just simply out in nature, by himself. And in most cases, these children at 13 had never been away from the security of their homes. See, that comfort means predictability. They knew where food was. They knew they had shelter. They knew they could be in the warmth and the wrapping of their mom's arms. They knew where that was. But removing the blindfold when he got there, found himself in a strange territory. My gosh, it was eerie. It was frightening. And totally unfamiliar. And there he was in the dark. And in the dark, he heard strange and frightening sounds. He longed to be home. Most of these children, I would say. It's so much easier to be in that comfort zone, and here he is out in the dark, by himself. And he longs to be home, but safe. But in the morning, the sun begins to rise. The 13-year-old boy would stand and survey the territory, kind of get an idea of where he might be. And as he surveyed, he turns around, and lo and behold, there stands his father. He'd been there the whole night. The boy had never been alone. His father had been with him. No matter how far we move from the water's edge, no matter how uncomfortable we become in trying to be disciples of Jesus Christ, we know that we are under the protection of God our Father. And we believe that. So we are to step off the water's edge. But as we do, people, I remind you, Jesus' words before he sent his disciples out. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. In the name of the Father, and of the Son,